Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Demon Slayer, the Flower of Happiness. Chapter 4. Aoi and Kanao. I'm just not very good with Kanao. Still, it's not that I hate her. She's never done anything to me, and we've never actually butted heads or anything. It's just that she's hard to be around. If I had to say, Kanatsuyuri is like a doll. She doesn't answer when you say something to her. She's constantly wearing that empty smile, and she can't make a decision on her own. She always has to toss a coin. I'm short-tempered, so I get cross with her. Sometimes, I just want to throw my hands up and be done with her. Age-wise, I'm the older one, but in terms of rank, Kanao's much higher than me. She's so full of Demon Slayer talent that, even though she's still young, she was chosen as a tsuguko, an apprentice to the hashira. On the other hand, I survived the final selection on nothing more than luck. I'm a coward, and I'll never make my name in actual battle because I'm terrified of fighting demons. Thanks to Lady Shinobu's merciful ways, I can stay here at the Butterfly Mansion, take care of injured corps members, and help them with their recovery training. Does a demon slayer who can't kill demons have any value? Of course not. I'm a burden on the corps. Maybe that's why I get strangely out of sorts with Kanao. Once I realized it was more or less an inferiority complex, my own pettiness annoyed me. I was hating myself more and more. And then he came along and said to me, "You helped me, Aoi. So you're now a part of me. I'll think about you when I go into battle." He said that someone as useless as me was a part of him, that he would take all these feelings with no outlet into battle with him. He said it without affectation or hesitation, with a smile like the sun. So I decided to try. I decided to throw myself into whatever I actually could do. And yet, when the Sound Hashira ordered me to accompany him on a mission, I started shaking all over. I remembered the terror of confronting a demon. I couldn't even keep him from snatching up Naho. Kanao! Kanao! I kept shouting, like a fool. And Kanao grabbed my hand. Without tossing a coin, her brow furrowed and teeth gritted, she held my hand tightly, ignoring the Sound Hashira as he yelled at her. I still haven't been able to thank her for that. Shopping? Yes. I'd love it if the two of you would go. Her superior, Shinobu, had called her to her room, so Aoi had assumed she would be taken to task for the Sound Hashira incident. But that wasn't what happened. It felt strange to be told to go shopping together. Aoi stole a glance at Kanao sitting next to her. She was staring into space with the same expression as always on her face. Aoi had no idea what was going on in her head. "I wrote down here the medicines that I want you to buy," Shinobu said, and smiled. If the older had been asked to run errands with the silent Kanao, it would have been a hard request to accept, even if it was Shinobu doing the asking as much as she loved and respected her. But for Aoi at the moment, it was a welcome lifeline. She bowed her head, thinking she'd finally be able to thank Kanao. "I understand. We'll go, then. Thank you very much. We'll need all these because Tanjiro and the others will most likely return here when their current mission is over," Shinobu continued lightly. This startled Aoi. Now, Yuzu's with them, so there's probably no need to be concerned. But let's be as prepared as possible while we wait for them. Aoi accepted the instructions silently. They had gone that mission. In Aoi's place. Because I'm pathetic. She gently bit her lip. She sincerely hoped that it wasn't a dangerous mission. But this was a self-serving wish. If a hashira was on the job, then it couldn't have been simply to round up some small fry demon. When they went to dispatch the demon lurking in the Infinity Train, they came back battered and bruised all over. The mission inflicted wounds on both body and mind, and they were so black and blue that it was painful just to look at them. This time, all of those injuries would be because of her. "Please, please be safe," she prayed, practically in tears. You all have to make it back here together. The tips of her fingers on her lap trembled. She willed them to be still, but the shaking didn't stop. Always closed her eyes firmly at her own cowardliness. The wholesale chemist where Shinobu was a regular stood in a town a little way from the butterfly mansion. Always had been there any number of times, trailing along behind Shinobu. Welcome. She recognized the manager who greeted them. He was too thin and had a face like a shriveled eggplant. Hello, we were hoping to buy some medicines, Always replied. Since Kanao didn't speak as a general rule, Always held Shinobu's list in one hand and asked for the items they needed. She wasn't particularly anxious about her ability to pick out medicine, at least. But when it came time to pay, the color drained from her face. She was sure she brought her wallet, and yet it wasn't there. The wallet into which she carefully tucked the money from Shinobu was nowhere to be found. She desperately fumbled around in the pockets of her core uniform and then put a hand to her mouth. Oh! She suddenly remembered that she pulled it out of her uniform to pay someone just as they were leaving the mansion and that she'd left it on the table there. Astonishing. It was an unthinkable error. She froze in shock. Kanao peered at her, as if sensing something. Kanao, I'm sorry, Always said in a hoarse voice, bowing so deeply her nose practically touched her kneecaps. I forgot my wallet. There was no response from Kanao. She was so ashamed and miserable, she wanted to disappear even more than before. In a turn of bad luck, neither she nor Kanao had brought along their personal wallets since they were only going out to do the shopping. Kanao stared hard at her coin and began to blanch. Always smiled lifelessly and said, I would never take that away from you. They had been to this shop countless times, and so she pushed aside her embarrassment and asked to start a tab. The deeply wary manager simply would not agree to it. Ask all you want, but this is a business. Unfortunately, the owner's out today, and I don't have the authority, he said, before muddying the conversation with a question. And what exactly is it that you all do? This core of yours, what sort of group is it really? What? Always was at a loss for words. At times like this, not belonging to an official government organization made things difficult. Because no one believed them when they talked about demons and all the rest, the social trust toward the Demon Slayer Corps was definitely not high, except among the Wisteria houses. The Demon Slayers risked their lives and fought demons for people, but they weren't even granted permission to wear their Nikrin swords. When Always was stuck for a reply, the manager looked at the two girls with hard eyes. What do you do with nothing but women out there? The one who came last time was strangely provocative. You're not actually involved in some shameful business, now, are you? This sort of baseless rumor spread because it was only ever women who came from the butterfly mansion to do the shopping. Always was furious at how coarsely the manager was looking at them. I understand. No need for a tab. Good day, she announced politely. She left the shop, dragging Kanao behind her, and instantly regretted the act. Now I've done it. She held her head in her hands. There was no way they would make it back to town while the shop was still open if they returned to the butterfly mansion now to get her wallet. She really should have controlled her temper. She should have kept bowing her head and stayed quiet, no matter what the man said to her. She simply couldn't hold her tongue when it came to Shinobu or the Corps being disrespected. I'm an idiot. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Just when she decided to move forward so as not to waste the kindness of the words that boy had spoken to her that day, her feelings always raced ahead of her. It was pathetic how she was always running in circles. All of the things they were supposed to buy that day, the medicines, the sake for medical purposes, the cotton for bandages, they were all essential and indispensable. What if the demon slayers returned and the mansion wasn't all stocked up? What if they were so seriously injured that even Shinobu couldn't handle it? What if the worst happens to them because of me? Just picturing it, she felt her legs tremble wretchedly. Her own idiocy made her field of view go dark. I'm sorry, Kanao. This trip was turning out not to be the right place to express her gratitude to the younger girl. Hanging her head dejectedly, Ollie turned toward Kanao and bowed once more. I was already plenty deadweight before, being too scared of demons to go on a mission. To think I can't even do the shopping. Right. I really am the worst. As she spoke, tears threatened to spill out of her eyes. She desperately held them back. The base of her throat grew hot, and she felt a pang inside of her nose. Even I know I'm pathetic, Kanao watched her in response, saying nothing. I'll try asking again. I'll see if I can bring the money tomorrow. She was about to turn away when Kanao's hand reached out to her. Kanao patted Ollie's head awkwardly. This was not a typically feminine soft hand. This was the hand of a girl who had trained and worked until the skin grew thick. This hand had fought to protect someone, and at its touch, Ollie's tears stopped. Kanao, she said, confused. The girl smiled the tiniest bit and took Ollie's hand. Without it, are you okay? Or let's go, she started walking. Are we going back to the butterfly mansion? Ollie asked the girl, silently pulling on her hand. Kanao didn't say anything. Not yes, not no. But this isn't the way back to the... And we still need the medicine. Ollie hesitated, looking back over her shoulder at the shop steadily growing distant behind them. But Kanao kept on walking, as though she hadn't heard Ollie. Ollie sighed and resigned herself to the situation. It was things like this that made her not understand Kanao. After walking for a bit, Kanao abruptly stopped. The road was packed with people. What's this? Ollie took a hard look. It seemed that they were doing something in front of the local drinking establishment. Maybe some kind of show? She wondered upsetly. Oh dear. What adorable girls you are, said an elegantly dressed older woman standing nearby. Go on ahead and watch. She half dragged them forward. Oh no, we're... Now that I'm looking at you, I feel like I've seen you somewhere, haven't I? Don't be shy. Have a peek. They're neck and neck on the sweets. Ollie ended up peering at the tavern through the gaps between the other spectators and saw that a number of men and women were competing in an eating contest. Now that she thought about it, eating and drinking contests had been everywhere in the Edo era, but they had essentially dropped off the map as popular entertainment these days. 45 manju, 7 large bars of yokan jelly, 70 ogusamochi mini cakes, for takwon daikon radishes. Voices cried out unbelievable numbers, and Ollie doubted her ears. The appetite of the sumo wrestler taking up center stage was especially remarkable. He polished off a yokan bar in a split second and then stuffed manju after manju into his mouth. Just watching him was nearly enough to give her heartburn, but Ollie was more curious about Kanao's reaction. She hadn't heard it directly from Kanao herself, but apparently her parents had been so poor that they had sold her to a procurer. Shinobu and her late sister rescued her from that fate and brought her up as a demon slayer. Ollie was worried about what she would think of all this. Kanao? She glanced at Kanao timidly and found that the girl was staring blankly at the spectacle with the same emotionless expression with which she looked at everything else. A massive amount of food was being consumed, not because the people eating were hungry, not for the purpose of staying alive, but for sheer entertainment. Looking at the girl's face and profile, Ollie felt like she could hardly stand it for some reason. Let's go. This time, Ollie took Kanao's hand. She gripped it tightly, and Kanao looked up at Ollie curiously, without a word. They were about to leave when several people screamed, WH-21. Ollie looked back and found that the sumo wrestler had collapsed. A half-eaten manju dropped from his hand and rolled away. The young wrestler's face was ashen as he groaned for a moment or two. His eyes rolled back in his head before long, and he lost consciousness. He was frothing at the mouth. The spectators screamed once more. What? Did he get some manju stuck in his throat? Hey! Pry his mouth open. Should we give him some water? I heard some men in the crowd talking. It sounded like they were going to take some misguided measures in an effort to help the wrestler. They can't. The moment she had the thought, her body was already moving. Excuse me. Excuse me. Please let me through. Let me through. She forced her way to the center of the crowd and knelt down beside the sumo wrestler. She checked his breathing, his pulse, his pupils, the inside of his mouth, and the sound coming from his stomach, in that order. The color drained from her face. I knew it. This is more serious than him simply having something stuck in his throat. To be blunt, his condition was rather serious. Shinobu would have been able to help him if she had been there, but the only one there now was Aoi. Could she do it? Take someone else's life into her hands? After all, she couldn't even face a demon. But if I don't, he'll... Aoi bit her lip hard and recalled the emergency procedures written in the medical books she read. She took a deep breath and called out to the spectators surrounding them, "This man could die unless we take action right now. Please, someone hurry and get a doctor." She got it. I'll go, a man shouted and ran off. Then Aoi looked at Kanao beside her. Kanao, go talk to the owner of the tavern and get the following items. Impatiently, she listed the bare minimum of things she would need to treat the wrestler. And then she remembered that wasn't enough to set Kanao in motion. Your coin dash. She looked over her shoulder and saw Kanao's back as the girl raced. Inside the building. She paused. It hadn't been an order from Shinobu, their superior, and Kanao hadn't tossed a coin to decide. She listened to Aoi and was doing as she asked. Confused and moved, Aoi turned back to her patient. Hey, you, came a voice from the crowd, and a man with his hands stuffed in his pockets stepped forward. It was clear at first glance that he was no upstanding member of society. What's going on, little lady? I bet a fair chunk of money on this sumo wrestler. If he's got something stuck in his throat, get him too. Chuck it up, and then he can keep going. Don't go making out like it's some huge deal and getting in the way of my win. Got it? His breath reeked of alcohol. In all likelihood, he'd been placing bets with his friends. Unhappy at the abrupt interruption to the contest, he reached out toward the wrestler. Aoi stiffened and slapped his hand away. Did you not hear me? She said. This man's life is in danger. He needs immediate treatment. H&H? He arched an eyebrow at her. You're in the way. Please get back. What the look on his face changed, and he tried to grab her. Aoi deftly dodged, caught hold of the man's arm, and flipped him onto his back. Even if she was a failure as a core member, she had still made it through that training hell. A man like this was nothing to her. I believe I said to get back. Why you? If you will not kindly cooperate, next time I will break your arm, she announced coolly, narrowing her eyes. The man gulped loudly. Perhaps her threat worked. The man left, albeit cursing the whole while and spitting out the standard "I'll get you for this," before vanishing. To the suddenly excited crowd, Aoi said, "Everyone, please be quiet." Having driven her point home, Aoi shifted the wrestler's body. When she had secured his airway, she saw Kanao racing toward her with all the things she needed. If this girl hadn't been here, this sumo wrestler might well have died, said the doctor who came running over at last. The remaining spectators let out a cheer. You did it. Nice work. Aoi could hear people shouting here and there in the crowd. Ah, you girls are really something. The old woman who had urged them to the front earlier was one of those people. She looked at them admiringly and then slapped the plump shoulder of the tavern master and sponsor of the contest. Come now, Yashitaro. You make sure you thank these girls properly. If you'd had someone die on you, you'd be in a real tight spot right about now, HM? Give them a generous reward. Her attitude was friendly, and it was clear that the two of them knew each other. I will, fine. Honestly, I'm no match for you, Okao. The master turned to Oi and Kanao. Thank you so much for your help. Please, take these with you as a small token of our gratitude. Oi was taken aback when he held out a cask of sake and a barrel of rice. She found she couldn't respond. Intended for the victor of the contest, neither was what could be called a small token, nor were they so easily carried with them. Nevertheless, Oi was glad for the sake, which they had been planning to buy anyway, and they could make some money selling the rice. When she thought about how they'd be able to buy the medication and bandages, the weight of the barrels no longer seemed like a serious issue. They split their reward between them, and Kanao started out ahead of Oi once more. Her stride was easy and calm, while Oi staggered along behind her. Kanao was again leading her in the opposite direction from the road home to the butterfly mansion. As Oi wondered what was going on in her head, she suddenly remembered, oh, right. Thanks. I have to tell Kanao thank you. She had to thank Kanao for the whole incident with the sound hashira, and also for what she had done back there. Kanao had listened to Oi and responded promptly, enabling them to save that sumo wrestler. It would have been difficult for Oi to have managed all on her own. Hey, Kanao, she called out to the back bearing the rice ahead of her. Kanao stopped and looked over her shoulder at Oi. Kanao stared at her, waiting for her to continue. You have to say it, she told herself. When she actually tried to form the words, she felt strangely awkward. As Oi groped for the right thing to say, she heard a thunderous, angry roar. You cow! If you're gonna kill me, then kill me already. Don't think I won't. I'll kill you, alright? You useless good for nothing. What? Oi froze in place. She heard a spectacular crash as something shattered, followed by a child crying. What's that? What's going on? Oi whirled her head around. Kanao silently pointed toward a house and a back alley behind a paperer's shop, no doubt Kanao's way of saying that was the source of the commotion. Oi stepped into the narrow alley to find a row house with a frontage of just under 3 meters. A so-called partition longhouse. One of the sliding doors was half open, and broken bowls and cups were scattered on the ground outside. Oi swallowed hard. Excuse me, she called. Are you all right? A tall, skinny man came flying, almost tumbling out. A woman rushed out after him with a baby on her back. Oi gasped when she saw what was in the woman's hand. She held a broad-bladed carving knife that shone dully. Oi could hear children crying inside the gloomy house. Today my patience finally runs out, the woman snarled. I'm going to carve him into pieces. This simpleton of a husband. I'd like to see you try, the husband shouted. You fat cow. What did you say? Go ahead and say that one more time. I dare you. Oh, I'll say it. I'll say it until the stars fall from the sky. You enormous pig. Furious at her husband's abuse, the woman yanked him up by his collar with a plump hand. The man shrieked like a stuck pig, which jolted Oi out of her dumbfounded staring. Please stop this, she cried. He will really die, you know. Don't try and stop me. This is none of your business. The woman glared at her with bloodshot eyes. Oi didn't flinch at the ferocity of the woman's gaze. Instead, she pulled the couple apart and asked, Why are you so angry? This lout spent all our earnings on drink and gambling. The rice box is empty. We've got no savings. The whole family's going to starve to death now. The woman went on and on, before pushing her husband away and dropping to her knees. She began to sob, and the cries that slipped out from those parched lips were almost like the howls of a wild beast. Oh, Mitsu. The husband looked anxiously at his wife. Sorry. Just hang in there. I'm sorry. He pressed his forehead to the ground in apology. A boy came out of the tenement then, pulling a small girl by the hand. They were maybe 7 and 5. The girl was crying, and her older brother was desperately trying to hold back his own tears. "Mom, don't cry," he consoled his mother earnestly. "I'll work real hard." The kind face of the strong little boy overlapped with that of a certain demon slayer in her mind. "Don't cry. When I grow up, I'll work a lot and become really rich, and I'll make sure you have a great life." At the boy's admirable declaration, Oi gave Kanao a quick signal with her eyes, but Kanao didn't notice. She was staring at the sobbing family with narrowed eyes. She looked as if she were seeing something very far away, something she could never have again. "Kanao," Oi said gently. "The rice." Kanao finally picked up on Oi's intent and nodded. She let the barrel of rice slide off of her back to the ground. "Please take this," Oi said, and the couple lifted their heads, surprised. "It should be enough to tide you over for a while. And you could also sell some for money." "Really, miss, do you mean that, young lady?" the wife cried. "But we couldn't." "Please promise me, though, that you won't use the money from selling this rice to buy sake or gamble," Oi said. I won't. This is just so dash," the man pledged, his hands together as if in prayer. "I'm a new man. I'm reborn. I'll never for the life of me do anything to hurt my wife and children again." "All right, then." Oi turned on her heel. She was about to step out into the road when the wife called out to them. "You do this for us when we're total strangers?" Oi hesitated. She didn't really know what to say. She just wanted to help the boy who was so desperate to help his parents. She wanted to help a mother who would choose to starve as a family rather than so much as consider selling one of her children, even in such poverty. That was all. Oi felt like it was a bit different from wanting to help. She felt like "I wanted to help" was an extremely arrogant way of putting it. In the end, she said nothing and left the alley. "Miss Ladies, where are it?" The boy chased after them, yanking his little sister along by the hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much," he said and bowed deeply. The little girl also dipped her head in imitation of her big brother. "My dad sells these, so." The boy dug in his kimono and held out a pinwheel. He likely was giving it to them as a thank you, but Oi hesitated to accept it. Considering his family's situation, it was hard to believe that this was just a pinwheel. They could sell it for cash. But Kanao reached out and took the pinwheel from the boy, without even flipping her coin. Even so, it was an extremely natural movement with no hesitation whatsoever. "Thanks," Kanao said in a small voice, and the boy beamed. It was a bright smile from the bottom of his heart. Oi felt a sharp pang in her own heart as she watched him. The boy pulled his sister along behind him, headed back to their family home, repeatedly thanking them as he went. Oi stared at Kanao, and Kanao blew on the pinwheel in her hand. The red wheel went round and round. "Why?" Oi asked. "Why were you able to accept that so easily? Why didn't you flip your coin?" For a while, Kanao stared at the spinning pinwheel, but eventually she said slowly, "This was, that boy's, the feelings in his heart. Oh, he would have been hurt if we didn't accept it." Oi stared at Kanao with wide eyes, speechless. There was a huge lump in her throat, she couldn't say anything. At the same time, she was embarrassed by her own hopeless foolishness. She'd been thinking it was arrogant to want to help them, but she had nonetheless hesitated to accept the boy's thanks. In her heart, she had sympathized with their impoverished condition. But if they hadn't accepted the boy's thanks, then their own actions would have been complete charity. And the boy did not want to be the sad recipient of handouts. Kanao had understood that, so she'd been able to easily accept the pinwheel. And meanwhile, she was an extraordinarily half-hearted hypocrite. Oi hung her head in self-loathing, and Kanao turned to her as if to urge her to come along. Aoi trailed after her dejectedly. This again wasn't the road back to the butterfly mansion, but she no longer cared. After she followed Kanao for a bit, a large red umbrella came into view. A tea house, Aoi thought upsetly. Kanao whirled her head around in front of the tea house, as if looking for someone. She then asked an old man, who appeared to be the owner of the tea house, something in a quiet voice. Kamroji, the man replied. Oh, you mean Mitsuri? She's not here today. Kanao looked crestfallen. Mitsuri? Probably Mitsuri Kamroji, the love hashira. She and Shinobu were good friends. Now that Aoi was thinking about it, she'd heard that Mitsuri was a regular at a tea house in this area. Apparently, the Sanshoku dango dumplings were scrumptious. Why would Kanao be looking for the love hashira? Maybe she has a message for her from Shinobu? In that case, wouldn't she have come straight over here after they left the chemist's? And if Kanao had a message to give, Aoi would have also been informed of the errand. She suddenly put a hand to her mouth. Oh! She could think of only one reason for them to be there. You weren't actually going to borrow money from the love hashira, were you? She asked Kanao. After a moment's hesitation, Kanao nodded. Because you were in trouble, Aoi. Aoi didn't know how to respond. I thought maybe. But I couldn't help at all. Warm droplets of water ran down Aoi's cheeks as she stood there. The tears she'd worked so hard to hold back spilled out of her eyes. Kanao seemed surprised as she watched this, and finally she reached out to place a tentative hand on Aoi's shoulder. Thanks, Aoi murmured in a hoarse voice. Suddenly, her heart felt lighter. You've helped me out in so many ways today. And when the sound hashira was about to carry me away, you held my hand, and you didn't let go. Thank you. Kanao looked troubled, turning her face downward as if embarrassed. I finally told her, Aoi thought. If I was alone, Kanao said quietly, I wouldn't have known what to do when that sumo wrestler collapsed or when that couple was fighting. Kanao. Aoi's eyes grew damp once more. When did making decisions without flipping your coin? Kanao was silent for a moment. You start. Tanjiro. She voiced an unexpected name. He told me. You have to live by your heart, he said. You can do it. So. Oh. Is that it? Aoi understood everything when she saw Kanao's pale cheeks flush red. Just as Tanjiro's words had freed Aoi from guilt and a deep-rooted inferiority complex, they had also changed Kanao. The boy like the sun had turned the girl like a doll into a person. That was why Kanao had such a gentle and peaceful look on her face now. Aoi looked at her, and her heart swirled with emotion. A warmth that made her want to cry. A hint of sadness that the boy hadn't only offered his words to her. And a childlike joy, like she and Kanao were sharing something that was for the two of them and no one else. All this time she'd lived with this girl but felt that she was somehow far away. Now she felt so very close. Kanao was there, right beside her. Aoi stared silently at the girl's flushed cheeks. Come now. Eat up, the elderly proprietor said, carrying out a tray laden with tea and Sanshoku dango. He set it down on the edge of the bench next to them and started to walk away. No, we. When Aoi confessed that they didn't have any money, the elderly man gave them a bittersweet smile and said, I wouldn't take any from you. You're Mitsuri's friends, aren't you? Demon slayers? Oh. Aoi nodded. Yes. We are. My daughter, you know, when she was attacked by a demon, Mitsuri saved her. If I had to say, well, I could never repay that debt. Aoi listened in silence as the man continued. It's a tough job, but you keep at it. Just don't go pushing yourselves, all right? He offered and went back inside the tea house. Aoi contemplatively looked back and forth between the owner's bent back and the steam rising up from the teacups. The unadorned words of gratitude, the kind gaze, the faint warmth in her heart. The older would have said something servile like, in that case, I cannot accept such a kindness. I'm a coward who can't even set foot onto the battlefield. But she didn't feel like that anymore. As a member of the Demon Slayer Corps, finding someone who understood and appreciated the Corps overwhelmed her with delight. Aoi made a tiny sniff. Should we gratefully accept this, Kanao? She asked with a smile, and Kanao nodded firmly, a smile on her own face. The Sanshoku dango recommended by the love hashira were indeed delicious and just the slightest bit salty. As they left the tea house, the western sky glowed red. Aoi walked with Kanao through the twilight town. Long shadows stretched out at their feet. When they got back to the butterfly mansion, she would apologize for not being able to buy the medicine and come back to get it first thing the next morning. With this thought in her mind, they started out on the road home. Once they had reached the outskirts of town, she got the sense that someone was chasing them. Hey! You there! You girls! Wait! Aoi looked back to find the shriveled eggplant face of the chemist. Ah! Thank goodness, he said, panting. After waiting for him to get his breathing back under control, Aoi asked, What is it? The chemist smiled awkwardly. I'm really sorry about this afternoon. He handed them a neatly wrapped package with the medicines Aoi had tried to buy. You pay up whenever you can. What? But... Aoi furrowed her brow at the chemist's sudden change of heart. Kanao also stared at him curiously. The chemist shrugged awkwardly, probably because the girls were looking at him dubiously, instead of happily, as they wondered what wind had changed. The truth is, you see. He lowered his voice, as if concerned about being overheard. So the older woman you met at the eating contest was the chemist's own mother? Shinobu asked Aoi delightedly when Aoi had finished giving her a rundown of the day's events. Yes, Aoi confirmed. My goodness, she said admiringly. What a surprising coincidence. The chemist's mother, now retired, had apparently seen Shinobu, Kanao, and Aoi at the shop countless times. Although Western clothes were no longer particularly unusual, the uniforms of the Demon Slayer Corps were distinctive and had made an impression on her, it seemed. She just remembered where she'd seen Aoi and Kanao before when she returned to the shop and heard about the events of that afternoon. She was furious. Do you have holes where your eyes should be? Turning such lovely girls away empty-handed? Business, you know, it isn't just about chasing profits, now is it? Didn't I beat that into your head? Come on now, go find them. Damn fool of a son. The chemist apparently flew out of the shop with his mother's roars following closely after him. Not only that, but she spoke to the fabric store owner, who's a friend of hers, and we were able to buy what we needed there too and pay later, Aoi said. Well, Shinobu laughed. This mother of his is quite frightening, Him? Nicely done, Aoi. Aoi shook her head so hard, it threatened to fly off. A cold sweat sprang up on her brow. And not at all. To begin with, it was my fault for forgetting my wallet. It just happened to work out because Kanao was there. Kanao said the same thing. Shinobu told her. What? Did you manage to say to her what you wanted to tell her? WH-? Aoi lifted her face in surprise. Shinobu's gaze softened. From the look of you, I'd say you did manage it, then. Lady Shinobu. Struggling with things is definitely not a waste of time. It's necessary to train the mind and become stronger, Shinobu said. But I want you to at least remember this. You, Kanao, Kyo, Sumi, Nao, you're all my valuable helpers, my precious family. Without uttering another word at her superior's beautiful smile, Aoi set her hands down on the floor and deeply bowed her head. Perhaps Shinobu had noticed Aoi's complicated feelings toward Kanao and sent the two of them shopping together in the hope that something like this would result. A complex mix of feelings welled up in her and filled her heart. For a time, Aoi was unable to raise her head. When she left Shinobu's room, it was completely dark outside. The pale light of the moon poured in through the lattice window. Aoi had to put away the medicines they had bought, cut the cotton, make bandages. Right, while she was at it, she should also set out some sleepwear and futons for the core members so that they'd be ready when Zenitsu, Inosuke, Nezuko, and Tanjiro, the demon slayers who risked their lives to fight the demons, came back injured. After all, I'm a member of the Demon Slayer Corps too. She tightened her hands into fists. She was surprised at herself. This was possibly the first time since she'd survived the final selection that she'd felt so happy and purposeful. Would she someday be able to live with her head held high and not have the fact that she'd survived weigh on her conscience? Would she come to like herself just the way she was? "You're going to be all right," a voice said. Whose voice was it? It might have been Tanjiro's, or maybe Shinobu's, or perhaps Kanao's. Aoi's lips spread into a slight smile at how naturally Kanao's name had come out. Iwai. Nao called, sounding troubled. One of the core members on bed rest is asking about their bandages. "What do you want us to do?" "I'll be right there." Aoi composed herself and headed for the sick room at a trot. End of chapter 4. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.